New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we will be exploring chakras as gateways to other dimensions. My guest is Dr. Richard Jelusich, who is the chairman of the board of the California Institute for Human Science. He is also the creator of integrative chakra therapy and has trained over 500 therapists in this modality. He is the author of Eye of the Lotus, Psychology of the Chakras, and also I Can Relate, How We Intuitively Choose the People in Our Lives. Richard lives in California, and now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Richard. It's a pleasure to be with you once again.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to be looking at chakras, of course, and in particular, we'll focus on the first chakra located typically at the base of the spine, and at the seventh chakra, typically located here at the crown of the head. Some people might say just above the crown of the head. You regard these two chakras as being distinct from the 5 other chakras of classical description that are more in the center of the body.
I just preface that by saying that, my research and my investigations have been through many spiritual consultations with people and recording what I have felt is the manner and the way in which the chakras actually work. So when I started really observing chakras 1 and 7, to me, they were much more like gateways of consciousness than actual centers that would directly affect our cognitive perceptions in space-time.
Which is why in your book, you refer to dominant chakras. You point out that each individual tends to have a dominant chakra or maybe 2 dominant chakras, but you haven't seen the first or the 7th chakra ever being a dominant chakra.
Not really. In over 34 years of doing this work, most people, in fact, I haven't really, as you say, I haven't really seen anyone who's dominant in the 1st or 7th chakra, but there are higher and lower aspects to these chakra. I found that when really getting into it and making these observations, that when I wrote my book, Eye of the Lotus, I didn't put so much meat in how they affect our waking personality through the 4 aspects, the mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Nonetheless, they do exist. They are there. And as you say, it's a little bit interesting to say, actually, where is a chakra when it's not limited to space or time, but they're more or less located along the column of the spine. So yeah, the crown chakra at the peak or the top of the head, and the root chakra at the perineum where the legs join the body.
It dawned on me that probably the reason that you haven't encountered people whose dominant chakras are the 1st or the 7th is because this might be extremely rare. Like in my imagination, a person who was a dominant 1st chakra person might spend their entire life focused on nothing but the accumulation of wealth and money.
Yeah, it could be just their physical presence. Like in the 1st chakra, I've noticed that it takes a whole root chakra just to physically be present or to be physically here in this dimension.
And likewise with the seventh chakra, it would seem to me that a person with a dominant seventh chakra would be a saint, somebody who is, or a mystic, someone totally devoted to merging with the divine.
As you continue to awaken the chakras, for instance, in the astral or causal dimension, your perception and your perspective shift dramatically. You know, one of my main teachers, Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama, who was the founder and first president of the California Institute for Human Science, he said that people who have awakened their crown chakra, let's say in prior lifetimes, can sometimes be incarnated with a rather dome-shaped head, which he said that's what he had. But the idea that the chakra doesn't necessarily affect cognitive abilities, nonetheless, as that chakra awakens in higher dimensions, it, if you will, flows that higher level of capability and capacity to be aware into the being that you are in this dimension. So it does dramatically shift your level of awareness, but from a relative point of view. So the more you awaken yourself, the more you are kind of in that samadhi, that union with God, that state of a higher universal awareness of all things.
Now, I'm of the impression, Richard, that your work is based on, I guess, what I would call direct intuitive knowledge. You perceive these things yourself, you have for a long time, and that on occasion, it seems like your interpretation of the chakras differs from some of the descriptions that one finds in the popular literature. Is that fair?
It's entirely fair. You know, I've taught psychology of the chakras at CIHS many times, and we've used books by Anadia Judith and Carolyn Mace, and you know, I've even heard interviews with Deepak Chopra where he was talking about some political candidates and what chakra he thought was very active in them and his interpretations. But, you know, it goes back to our prior interview where, you know, even in the Vedas, when they talk about the color of a chakra, we think the heart chakra is green. And yet one of the authors of the Vedas would say, oh, the heart chakra is a beautiful cloud-like color. And another author would say, oh, the heart chakra is a beautiful crimson color. And while colors do exist in the astral dimension, they're more vibrant, they're brighter. It may not necessarily be interpreted as a frequency that emanates that specific color to the observer. So that's why when I did my research, I thought, okay, well, this is a book of opinions. And it's in the notes from the author. It says, you know, please just understand this is the way that I perceive things functioning, as a way of helping a person to understand through the dominant chakras why they perceive reality the way they do.
Well, for example, the first chakra, the chakra right where the legs come together at the perineum for both men and women. I've often thought of this chakra as being like the pot of gold that is hoarded by a dragon. The base of the spine is where the Kundalini energy is said to be coiled up like a dragon. And in mythology, one sees that the dragon has no use particularly for the gold, but it will hoard this gold and collect. My sense of a first chakra individual is someone who wants to accumulate a lot of physical possessions merely for the sake of accumulating them. But I suspect that's probably a very superficial look at that chakra.
And it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, if you'll forgive the pun, it does root you in a kind of a materialistic point of view. So, yeah, and the idea behind the Kundalini rising physically up the spine, you know, to me personally, that's still kind of up for grabs because that word itself is more or less means awakening to me. But people who are inured in the root chakra, they really do have a focus on, I'm just here, I'm in this plane, there's nothing else, that's all there is, I have a physical existence, I exist. And as I said, it takes a whole root chakra just to have a physical presence in this dimension.
One of the other characteristics I would think of that notion of I exist is that outside of my skin is a universe that is not me. There's me inside the skin and not me everywhere else.
Right, which is really a problem. Simply because, as we do awaken, we come to realize that we're not separate from all things. And when we are separate, we have what we call a subject-object opposition. We believe that we're separate from something, and therefore we exert a certain measure of desire to control our external environment, but not in a sense of symmetry or in a concert of working together, but rather in control and conquering.
And I would think that the seventh chakra is just about the opposite of that. It's more about submission to the universe, not to try to control it.
Yeah, again, looking at this chakra directly, intuitively, it's very difficult to explain in written words how I interpreted the immensity of the power of this particular chakra as what I call the God spot, or the toroidal energy field, where the center is the 0 point, where everything and nothing exists in the same moment. And to awaken that chakra, one having not done that can only imagine what that might be like. But having done it, everything changes for that person. So again, from a relativistic point of view, I am looking at the seventh chakra from my current state of evolution, how much I understand right now about the way that chakras look. But the idea is to have a person make their own investigations into what the seventh chakra really means, what it represents, and how it is a conduit or a gateway to levels of consciousness perhaps we're completely unaware of.
People who are viewers of the New Thinking Aloud channel probably know and can find, if they don't know, in our listings page, that we've done interviews on the chakras with, amongst other people, Jelusich Banerjee, who is a Sanskrit scholar, talking about the original Sanskrit literature about the chakras, Arthur Avalon's book, for example, and explaining the symbolism of the deities and the sounds, the mantras associated with each of the chakras. It's an extraordinarily elaborate system. If you look at it strictly in terms of the iconography that emerged out of the Indian subcontinent. But I gather you're looking at the chakras not as a scholar of Hindu art, but as an experiencer. And so I guess a good starting point for our conversation is to ask you, how would you define a chakra? What is a chakra to you?
I like to use the term the toroidal energy field. For those who don't know, a toroid or a torus is a donut shape. And it typically has a center where, as I said earlier, to repeat myself, everything and nothing exists in the same moment, what some people call the God spot or the 0 point. And the idea behind the Tibetan Dorje or the Hindu Vajra is that these are tools that represent these toroidal energy fields, and that by holding, the Vajra or the Dorje, what you're doing is you're clasping your hand around everything and nothing at the same moment, which is to help you to rise past a mentalism, or should say maybe just only a scholarly understanding of the chakras, to a greater level of awareness that one can embrace, not just only through the sound itself, not just only through mantras, but through direct intuition. And so for me as an experiencer, it requires faith. And faith is trusting with your heart what your mind does not yet know. Faith is trusting something to be true when there's no evidence to support it. So that's why, Dr. Murayama wrote about this. I wrote about this, yoga without faith, just stretching, prayer and meditation without faith, just thinking. So that gave me a way to look at the first and the seventh chakra. But then, Jeff, to try to describe it from an experiencer point of view is not very easy. Because how do you turn something like that into verbology that a person can read and say, I have a concept of what that represents? It's like biting an apple and then telling someone else who's never had an apple what it tastes like. And you have to have that direct inner revelatory experience. So think of it as this is a way to help people start thinking about, okay, well, what is the first and seventh chakra? And are they really gateways that hold a level of awareness that is beyond conceptual thinking?
The first time I heard a scientist talk about chakras was, over 50 years ago. And now the name of the scientist is right on the tip of my tongue, Bill Tiller. As a matter of fact, I believe I saw a picture of Bill Tiller sitting in on a seminar at CIHS.
Oh, yeah. Not only sitting in, but giving seminars. And he was on the original board of directors for CIHS. I knew Bill when he was alive. He endorsed one of my books.
Wonderful. Well, I knew him as well, a professor of materials science at Stanford University and deeply interested in the chakras. And I remember a lecture he gave in 1973 at De Anza College in California, in Cupertino, California. And he talked about the chakras as transducers. And by that, I think he meant that they bring into the physical plane where we are, the four-dimensional space-time matrix, and they bring into this plane energy that comes from outside, from other dimensions. I believe that's what he meant by transducer, that this energy from other dimensions, maybe it's a higher frequency energy, and it brings it down somehow to a lower frequency where we can perceive it.
Kind of like a step-down transformer, a higher form of awareness translating into this level of awareness. But as a person awakens, that awareness shifts dramatically. You're no longer the same person. It's like being born. You can't be unborn. You're now at this level of awareness. And this is why when people are awakening the chakras, no matter which one it is, 7, 4, 3, 1, it's always a process of, I don't want to use the word destruction, but it messes with your concept of reality as you are inured in your five sense perception intelligence in this dimension. It starts messing with that, and it brings up, it brings up stuff. And the idea is that, the karmic seeds in the chakras is as they become stimulated and to awaken, they bring it up. But as I've told people about karma is that when things come up, it's because you're now ready. You have the capability and capacity to comprehend this change, but you also have the means to bring other people into your life to help facilitate that change, just like you're bringing people together through your venue to gain a much greater understanding of thought and ideas and concepts and metaphysics.
Well, one of the points that Jelusich made is that traditionally the Kundalini energy is thought to rise up, starting at the base of the spine and moving up chakra by chakra to awaken each one in turn. And then you get to the crown chakra at the top of the head. That it was considered the process. But then Jelusich said it doesn't have to be that way. It could actually work the other way. The energy could come in through the top of the head from a different source, I suppose, than the Kundalini source, and then go down the body to activate the chakras in the other direction.
My thought is that, we tend to think in terms of directions because we're time and space oriented in a 3D reality. But if you think about the Sushumna, the main channel of energy that goes up and down the spine, through the lenses of all 7 chakras, it has a double pulse expansion compression waveform. And this is my experiencer talking, that I teach my practitioners actually how to regulate and modify that Sushumna energy so that Kundalini, whether it's moving this way or that way, is facilitated. But the emphasis there, if you're working spiritually on someone this way, is excuse my lack of clarity in how I explain this. You clean the lenses of the chakras as best you can as a healing practitioner, so that this quality of the flow of consciousness through the Sushumna and the Ida Pingala can be achieved in a safe manner, in a safe way. Because raising one's Kundalini without proper preparation is like going to the gym and trying to bench press 600 pounds with no training. It can be a difficult process.
And I have heard from time to time about people who decided to experiment with Kundalini energy and occasionally get themselves into trouble. At that point, they typically need to go to a guru or a master of Kundalini energy who can help them. And sometimes I know these spiritual masters have uncanny knowledge. My wife Janelle, for example, had an experience of Kundalini rising up the spine, and she couldn't control it, and it was very uncomfortable. And we learned of a Kundalini yoga ashram in Tennessee where an 80-year-old guru from India was presiding, and she went there, and within 24 hours, he was able to correct the problem permanently.
Yeah, I've worked with people who have had similar problems. And one fellow, his tinnitus became such that he had a dull roar moving through his head as a perceived sound, but it wasn't necessarily related to his TMJ. And we were able to get it down to a hum, but I think because he improperly practiced and he tried to open his chakras with a crowbar, essentially, that, his karma for this lifetime might be to just live with that hum for the rest of this incarnation. But, my advice to people is, if you're going to do any kind of Kundalini work, take it from someone who actually has experience of having done the work in a very safe way. And that person would make an assessment of you, determining which chakra or chakras to work with first, so that you then provide yourself a stable platform to be able to do this. Because a lot of people in our culture, we want it now. We want to do this at this moment. This is important. Yes. But as Yogananda said, one cannot be any closer to God than you already are. But sometimes we suffer from expectation that we're going to get someplace, when the emphasis is to focus on this moment, but in a very safe way. You do what you can at this moment and be content with that, because, being enthusiastic is great, but focus on the task at hand.
A book came out a few years ago called A New Science of Heaven. And he suggests that the energy that we're referring to could be thought of as plasma flowing through the body, plasma being charged particles. That, when electricity flows down the neural spikes down the axons and dendrites, that's actually plasma flowing through the body. And he suggests, furthermore, that the whole universe operates in a similar fashion with plasma filaments, that the universe itself is a giant brain and that we are plasma beings and are in contact with that same universe.
Sure. Why not? Why not? My personal feelings are there is no separation. Distance is no factor in doing any kind of healing work. And, I think we truly are here to engage our gifts for the purposes of helping each other.
Well, do you think, for example, that the energy associated with the first chakra that connects us to the earth, that grounds us? I know I used to be friends with people from an organization called the Berkeley Psychic School.
Yes, I've heard of it. Oh, yes.
They use the first chakra. They say you want to have a beam of energy from the center of the earth coming right into your first chakra, and then you're grounded. And that would be very different than connecting to the whole universe through the seventh chakra.
Well, it's more of a merging. Going back to our prior discussion. Some people say, this is my last incarnation, I'm leaving the body. And some people say, I'm bringing my soul down into my body. So I'm either going out or coming in. But it's really, to me, it's much more of a merging together or an elimination of the difference between the two. So when my practitioners are warming up to do their work, they'll do an exercise first, which is bringing earth energy up into the body and breathing it up into the body and letting it mix. And then bringing in, if you like, white light energy or divine energy down through the crown and down into the body and letting the two mix together in a merging. Because to me, the growth of one's awareness is the elimination of the difference between the physical and the non-physical. So one could argue humorously, the point of chakras is eventually to get rid of the chakras because they still represent uniqueness.
We're paradoxical creatures.
Definitely are.
Like snowflakes. No two people are alike, and yet at the same time we are versions of each other.
Very much so. Very much so. I've taken people to the land of the Maya many times, and one of their sayings is, I am another yourself. Yeah. And so the idea that the first and seventh chakra are gateways is there for readers' consideration and to continue their spiritual practices so that they can have their own inner revelatory experience of what that represents. And then that becomes their relative understanding increases. The cool thing about as people awaken spiritually is that it has a radiatory effect on all creation, not just themselves. So if you or I are doing some kind of spiritual practice that elevates our level of awareness, compassion, harmlessness, that goes everywhere, not just to earth, but anything that's in this dimension. Doesn't matter where or when it is, it has an incredibly beneficial effect.
Very interesting. And I concur. And the reason I concur is because I've always had this sense that the universe wants us each to become the best version of ourselves. And the universe seems to want to help us along to do that.
I think so. But when we pray and meditate and say, I will be happy to face anything but that, then the universe brings a Costco pallet of that and drops it right in front of you and says, okay, exactly. Because, it's better to want what you need than to need what you want, right? And if you truly want to grow spiritually, the universe is going to bring that and drop it right in front of you.
Which seems to be ultimately why we're here, is to overcome the challenges that are presented to us, or fail at trying at least to endeavor to overcome those challenges.
And not to feel like it is us alone by ourselves. Because if you really are inured, let's say in the first chakra, you can feel it's all about me. I got to get what I can. I'm here. I have to be this material dimension. There's nothing else other than me. That's it. That's a very lonely existence. When, to me, the opposite is true. The universe is infinitely abundant and always providing the answers, and always, the gurus talk about how not only is the higher aspect of oneself aware of all the answers, but also how to go about doing it.
Now, you refer to the first and the seventh chakras as these gateways. But wouldn't it be the case that Bill Tiller's definition of chakras as transducers suggests that all the chakras are gateways?
Indeed. The differentiation I made was in how it affects our cognitive daily perception. So, again, it's a book of opinions. I suppose one could argue, the paradoxical nature of chakras representing uniqueness and yet being timeless and formless. But to me, chakras 2 through 6 do have much more of a bearing on our everyday thinking, our perceptions, our reactions to our perceptions of reality.
You note that in your own clinical practice, you find that typically people who come to see you have a dominant chakra, one of those 2 through 6.
Mm-hmm. And that can be based on mission statement. It can be based on free will. It can be based on karma, or a combination of all three. And that person came in this lifetime with that orientation towards reality. Hence, that affects the way that they react, because that's the way that they're perceiving that reality. So as the chakra awakens, that creates what's called an evolutionary spiral, where their awareness creates the opportunity to make much better decisions. And then having achieved a better decision then creates a better awareness, and it just one thing built on another. But if you knew what your dominant chakra was, and you knew what the Buddhists call your proclivities, then you'd say, okay, well, like Yogananda said, you change your everyday habits, and then you achieve very good results.
One of the things I know in your book, Richard, is that in your experience, the largest group of people that you run into have the second chakra as their dominant chakra. I think you indicate about 40% of the people you run into have that as the dominant.
Precisely. And even at that, whether that chakra is dominant or not, most of us are processing a lot of things related to the second chakra, since it's related more to creativity, burdens, responsibilities, sexuality, sensuality, and so forth. So it doesn't even have to be dominant. That chapter in the book is over 5,000 words longer than any other chapter.
Well, I think what we should do is have a separate conversation, and we'll focus just on that chakra. Obviously, it's important. I think the second chakra is probably related to Freud's notion of the libido. And of course, for some people, Freudian psychology is the basis of all human psychology. So it's extraordinarily important.
Yeah, very much so, as we try to get a grasp on who we are and what we're doing. And, the idea behind writing a book on the chakras is no less to help us understand the truth of our nature, that we're much more than just physical beings, and that as we integrate or merge these aspects together, we eliminate suffering, because we see where the suffering comes from. We understand the disconnect, and then we endeavor to live a life much, much more in balance than rather simply reacting to a perception that was based on maybe a lower aspect of that chakra. Like first chakra, that's all there is. There's nothing more. This is it. I'm done. I live, I die. Yeah, maybe, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, it seems to me the fundamental idea of the chakras is that we are connected to a much larger reality, and whether the chakras are pure fantasy or they represent something ontologically real, the idea is that these are portals that reach out and connect the individual to a vastly larger world.
And yeah, to think of them as transducers is great. You have chakras in this dimension, astral dimension, causal dimension, and the causal is nurturing and holding the chakras in the astral, and the astral is nurturing and holding the chakras in the physical. And so there is definitely that transducer effect, but from a more non-dual perspective, which is difficult to understand.
It would seem to be simpler. You'd think non-dual, all is one. What could be easier to understand?
That would be nice. But when we're in the womb, the very first sensation that comes on is vibration sense perception, half a cycle to 500 cycles per second. So already in the womb, we're getting this input. And then, the hearing comes online, and then the other senses come online, and the brain is, in a sea of physical input. So therefore assuming that, this is all there is.
Somewhere along the line, though, we seem to get seduced by the idea that there's such a thing as me, and it's separate from all of the rest of the universe, which is not me, and I've got to look out for me and protect myself from all the not me. And it can become almost paranoid at times.
Well, this is how people can become manipulated. Anything that can distract you or take you outside of yourself or off of your center can be used as a form of manipulation. I mean, I even wrote a chapter in my book on how to avoid psychic manipulation. And Jeff, when I got halfway through writing the chapter, I thought, oh no, I'm actually telling them how it's done. And I thought, okay, all right, well, that's going to be their karma. But, how do you manipulate someone in the first chakra? You just keep making them think they have no control. They're only a physical body. You live and you die and you're done, and that's all there is. There's nothing else. So then that way you can get people to be in a state of fear. And, governments do that too, take you outside of yourself. And the idea for us especially in this age where there is such a proliferation of knowledge and wisdom coming to bear, like, when I look at these things, like I can't hold my phone up for you because it's in a holder. But these things like cell phones, I call them externalizations of the current state of consciousness. Right. That phone enables you to bring the Talmud, the Vedas, the Torah, these incredible teachings into your life. But it's not a technological thing. It's an externalization of the state of our consciousness at this point in space-time, which is as we're in the Dwapara Yuga, and as we're engaging in a place in space-time where we now have the capability and capacity to comprehend these teachings, as many teachers from the Mayans to the Vedas, all of these different cultures have told us that this particular age would be the age where we can arise collectively as a global human community to a much higher level of awareness. And so that's why you see me doing these crazy things like writing books about my own personal experiences, because I feel like we each have a gift, and I seem to be able to have some insights that might stimulate a person to have their own direct inner revelatory experiences.
I understand, and I think you alluded to it earlier, you are training therapists to practice integrative chakra therapy.
Yes. Yeah, I have over 500 students and graduates from the U.S. and Canada. So I have an ongoing school of teaching where students will spend probably at least 3 years with me or one of my instructors.
And I assume that this is separate from your role as chairman of the board of the California Institute for Human Science.
It's hard to separate the two, but yes. And as a matter of fact, I'm also faculty, and I'm teaching a course right now called Modayama Philosophy and Practice to students. So yeah, I have these multidimensional roles, but yes, ICT is something that's not part of the California Institute for Human Science.
If a student were to go through the program, they can become qualified to get a clinical psychology license and then get that additional training from you, I would imagine.
Yes, and some do. I have a student right now who's taking my Modiyama class, who is a graduate of ICT training from probably, 8-9 years ago. Now she's almost done with her doctorate at CIHS.
I see. Well, Richard, it's been a joy to be with you once again. I look forward to future conversations. We've still got 5 more chakras to talk about.
Okay. Well, Jeff, it's always a delight to be with you and very much enjoy your program.
Thank you, and thank you for being with me. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine, or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org